My name is Fraser. Um, I decided to do this project based on, first of all, my daughter asked me to take part in it, and I thought it was a great idea to be part of. I'm 6 generations Canadian.
Nice.
We originated from Sierra Leone and landed in Nova Scotia. So again, 6 generations I am, as of and Amanda 7, and so forth.
And I am 7 generations Canadian on my mother's side and 1st-generations Canadian on my father's side. He is born in Guyana.
I'm 8th-generation Canadian, and then my dad's Asian.
I was born in Halifax. My mom was born in New Glasgow, and sort of the family settled in. No, she was born in Guysborough, and they settled in New Glasgow. So that has a high population of Black families.
And what was that experience like over there? Because you mentioned it was quite segregated and there was pockets.
Yes. Honestly, I don't have a lot of history on that about her growing up, but it was a very tight community in the area she grew up. I mean, for me personally, I was born in Nova Scotia, but I more or less grew up here in Montreal. Being a young child in the area to growing up in Burgundy, it was a total different experience. In the sense that when they built, they created the low-income housing, which is an area in Burgundy. There's like literally an area that's low-income housing, and that versus where I grew up in my early years in Montreal was totally different. So growing up in Little Burgundy, the experience was different in the sense that I was a young adult. I had my children. Growing up there with my children was an experience in itself. Meaning that the crime rate, the sense of community was there, but the crime rate was very high. The police involvement in our community was very high. There was some good police officers versus some very bad police officers. The positive was there was community police officers, because I was a community activist at one point. So we had a lot of dealings with our local community police officers, which were very positive. Some of them, their early days was very positive in the sense, even my kids, I would let them ride around in the police cars.
Oh, wow.
Things like that, get neighbors calling, your police are in the back of the car. Like, oh, I know. Your children are in the back of the car. I'd be like, I know. But we became very close to, there was 2 police officers that were very community oriented, who really understood the community and the people who lived there. And as the years went by, we got a couple of other police officers who really came in and figured, oh, they're going to clean up the neighborhood and they're going to use tactics that were just totally unacceptable at the time. Well, still is. So there was that, the early days where the police officers engaged with the community and spoke with the people of the community, whereas the other police officers kicking in doors, chasing young Black men through the neighborhood, lying to get into people's buildings and apartments, and all kinds of things like that. So yeah, it was a totally different experience.
So you raised, how many children did you raise there?
4.
4 children.
It wasn't was not easy raising 4 children in Burgundy at the time. So that we're talking about 1981 to 1990, what I think 6, around 96.
Wow.
So the years of 85, 86 to 90 were some really bad years. When I say I was an activist, I worked with a lot of I worked with a few other young moms in the community as well. We created Youth in Motion. I was part of that. We did a lot of meetings with the city. We did a lot of community meetings, things like that. different, yeah, we organized constantly events through Tyndale St. George's. So I worked there. I was just part of the community. People knew that they could come to me or to some of the other, Kelly Thompson, Francis Waite, Kim Kidder. We did, they knew where they could go if they needed the help. Even if we were walking on the street, if the police stopped a young person, we would, I know me personally, I would like, what's going on? Things like that, being told, well, they're none of your business, but they are my business, you know. Nephews being chased to my doors, police trying to run in them to my mother's house because they wanted one of my nephews, and being able to stand there and tell them, no, go get a warrant. They didn't take kindly to someone who knew the law,
I was thinking that.
who stood up for, you know, what they believed in. So at one point I was even told, you know, your mother might need us one day and we're not going to come. So it was like, okay, that's fine. She got 13 children. We don't need you at that point. You know, so the threats, people being, I was being told, you better be careful. The police might shoot you. Well, that's the only thing they can do, right? Is shoot me. So be it if they do. I wasn't going to stop doing what I did. So.
Amanda, you were born here, right? And you grew up in Burgundy. What was that experience like for you? So you were a child growing up in this time.
Besides the crime, I could say we had a great childhood. The one thing that I miss, that I feel like my kids missed out on, is growing up with their friends. Like, because we lived in Burgundy, and Burgundy had this high concentration of low-income housing within a small block, you were growing up with all your friends. So we played outside. There was 15 of us deep, you know what I mean, playing in the back. Like, my mom was everybody's mom, so was Marsha Mahilia's mother. We had like 15 mothers, you know, growing up. So I feel like they didn't get that chance to experience that. So a lot of the people that I grew up with today were still friends because we literally grew up together from like sandbox, you know?
What was your experience? So your mom spoke about the police. What was your experience with the police?
She sheltered us. I mean, we lived from like the main park where everyone was at, which is Campbell Park. What is it called? They changed it to Oscar Peterson, I think.
Okay, yeah. Still call it Campbell.
So yeah, it's Campbell Park for me forever. But that park was like the hub. We weren't allowed to go to the park, which was like 3 streets over. So the park was like off limits.
You were allowed unless I went with you.
Yeah, so we were not allowed to the park. We can go to Tyndale Park, which was up the street, but Campbell Park was off limits. So, and you know, it was cool because my mom would yell, and we can hear her from the park when we did sneak there. She would yell, everyone could hear her. She'd be, Alexis, Alex, she would be yelling, and we could hear her. So it was not that far. But it was okay because everyone that grew up on Richmond, which is my street, no one was allowed to the park, so we kind of had to form our own club. So, yeah.
And if I can ask, the reason that you weren't allowed at this particular park, is it because that's where a lot of the violence took place?
Exactly. So a lot of crime was happening like in the central part of Burgundy, which is, I consider, the park. So yeah, we weren't allowed there. There was a lot of guys chilling on the block. So for her to keep us safe, we were allowed in the little square in Richmond Square, and my grandmother lived at the bottom of the street, and then we lived at the top, so that's where we played.
Did you understand the severity of things at a young age, or when did you start to understand that things were?
I mean, I don't think it's a matter of understanding. I think it was part of my normal.
Okay, yeah.
So, that was just what it was. We knew that we heard gunshots all the time. I seen my grandmother's door get kicked in, and my cousins running in the door. Like, that was part of my normal. So it didn't feel like anything else than the norm for us. Like, you know, I could remember my cousin running in my house, running from the police, and I think I was 5. And then my mom like saying, "Go downstairs and close the door, and you guys don't come upstairs," and hearing the police. trying to kick in my mom's door to find one of my cousins, and he was hiding under the bed. Like, I was 5, so I don't think I can remember a time when it wasn't like that.
And your mom being involved in the community, and you are as well. Do you want to explain how you're involved in the community?
Well, I work for DESTA Black Youth Network, and basically what I do is I'm the support service coordinator for the reentry program. So I help those that are currently incarcerated, and then once they transition and come home, so I help them with whatever they need from once they're inside, with support, like support letters, setting up for their parole, connecting resources, stuff like that. And then once they come home, we kind of like set them back up to whatever they need. I'm Burgundy through and through. Like I am involved in anything that has to do with Burgundy. Like, even if it's not for my job, I'm there. If it's for Tyndale, if it's for like Jason Shamba's Father's Day in the park celebration, anything you need from me that involves my community, I'm going to be there. I think what really solidified it for me was, I'm going to skip because I don't want to get emotional. I don't know. I just, I think it's always just been a part of me. And I think growing up, seeing like the hardships that like my dad and my cousins went through, and then in the early 90s, I think, like a lot of or 2000s, late 90s, a lot of the people that I grew up with were either in jail or were murdered. So then, in my nephew's father being one of them. So I think that's what really said, okay, you got to do something that's going to impact change.
And then for your Guyanese heritage, what did you learn about that?
You know what? Oddly enough, my dad wasn't, I can't say oddly enough because it's typical. He wasn't really in our lives for a bit. So I grew up with my Scotian side, but it was always something I always connected to my Guyanese side. Like, I always wanted to know more, and I did research on my own. My dad wasn't, for some reason, he's kind of disconnected to his side. So we had to find out a lot of stuff on our own, and then like later on, like recently, as he starts talking, like, it's so strange. Like, he didn't say any of these things 20 years ago, but
30 years
yeah,
ago.
30 years
40.
ago. Yeah, basically. So now I'm learning more as I go along.
Nice. Thank you, Magda. All right, last but not least, Jay, where did you grow up?
I grew up here.
You grew up here in Burgundy as well?
No, in St. Henry.
In St. Henry.
But even though I grew up in St. Henry, I was always in Little Burgundy. And I know you said, like, I didn't really have, like, friends around the block and stuff like that. Like, I feel like we grew up with so many cousins around.
Yes.
Like, so it, like, equaled out to things. Like, I always had, you know, Deja or Jaquan next door. Like, even, I didn't hang with him, but, like, it still counts. Like, he's still my family, you know?
But I will say, my family is, especially on my mother's side, huge. We're huge. There's over 100 of us. Like, we're talking first cousins. So, like, and we're so enmeshed that, I grew up with my friends, but we also grew up with my family. So, and that's what we still are like today. So I hang with my cousins still, a lot of my cousins, and our kids are growing up together. So my son, I only have one son, and my sister's son are like growing up like brothers. So,
and I think some people would call it unhealthy enmeshment, but this is us. That's our family. Like, we stay friends with our exes. I mean, they're very welcome to our houses. There's no animosity, regardless that you broke up how many years ago. It's like, you know, you're still welcome. Like their father, I'm not with Amanda's father, so, but he's very welcome in my house. He can come for parties, comes for Christmas, different holidays. So it makes, some people would call it unhealthy, whereas we call it our norm. We're all the same. Like, my best friends are my sisters, like, you know. That's who I hang with, or that's who I talk to on a regular basis, things like that. As with I have 5 children, and they're all close. The nephews and my sons are best of friends. So, as Shea was saying, she mightn't have grew up with kids around the block, but
Yeah, she grew up with her family.
Cousins around my age too.
Yeah, there's so many of us, and there's so
And
and
each
every
age group.
Yeah, there's like 7 to 8, depending on the age.
Yeah.
Like
Rhea's age, she has like how many
I have
cousins?
3.
no,
Yeah,
she's
like
the only
6.
girl, but there's like 8 of them that are exactly the same age.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a theme for you guys, and it's community, right? Where it's like it's almost embedded in your family DNA. Community
You know what's
is
funny?
big.
It's when you as you just said that I didn't mention it, but my mother, that's what she did as well. She
How could you forget that?
I know. She worked at Tyndale St. George's for numerous years, from as long as I can remember, and she always ran the she called it the old age bingo. So she had bingo once a week for the old people in the area, and she was just that community person. Anyone who needed a place to lay their head, if they needed a meal, we would wake up and see someone else in the house and like, who's that person, like, you know, type thing. She was a foster mom.
Wow.
So it comes from a long line,
Yeah.
like, you know, so she started, like, as far as I know, like, that's what she did, that's what I do. And even today, I'm not a community activist, but I work for Batshaw Social Services, so that's sort of along the same lines type thing.
It's definitely
you know?
along the
So
same lines.
yeah, it's you're right. It's a long line of
Yeah.
community.
I'm sure if we go
activity.
further back too, we'd see it in a different capacity.
Yeah, probably. Even my grandmother, I can honestly say, she took in children as well. Yeah. So.
Fascinating. Wow, so community is so similar to your mom, your grandmother. What has your experience been with? We'll start with the police.
Like I mean, I don't trust the police, but like I don't know. That's not something that I grew up like. I've never grown up around too much violence exposed to me, so I feel like there's no reason for me to be like not trust police. I just don't. You know, it just is what it is.
And you said that you're also Bayesian, correct? On your father's side.
Yeah.
What have you learned about that side of the family or that cultural part of yourself?
I mean, I used to travel there, and yeah, it was really beautiful. But I don't really get to go back anymore. But I still keep in touch with my family. Yeah.
Nice. Perfect. Is there anything else you want to add about what it was like for you growing up in St. Henry?
St. Henry. Well, I mean, I can talk about the fact that I go to like a predominantly white school.
Yeah.
So like I'm like one of the only faces of Black that are in my school, even since elementary school too. I feel like after daycare, I knew I like came from like, oh, there's so many white people. Like it was like I had to be self-aware. I'm like, you know, my skin is different. Like, but I always had a sense of love for my own like color, you know, my complexion. So it was never like a sort of weakness in my identity. It was more of like, okay, I stand out, but how am I gonna stand out in a positive way? How am I gonna show them that I'm not what they think that I am? You know?
Amazing.
For identity, so now we're going to shift back to the initial purpose of this, which is identity, right? As Black women, women of color, women who have Guyanese heritage, Bayesian heritage, you know, whose family dates back to Sierra Leone, how do you identify here in Quebec, a French-speaking province? How do you identify?
For me personally, I identify as Canadian. I mean, being Nova Scotian, I think, you know, I get asked the questions a lot. So, where are you from? Okay, Nova Scotia. So, where's your parents from? Nova Scotia. So, where's your grandparents from? You know what? Stop it now. I'm 6th generation. So, let's stop the questions of where you're from. In Quebec, I mean, I consider myself a strong Black woman, so I don't feel any way. I make my own roads in society, and I'm not going to let someone else dictate to me who I should be or who I shouldn't be. So fitting in Quebec, I don't have a problem fitting in Quebec, because I will not let anyone diminish who I am. So yeah, that's me personally.
So when somebody asks you, what are you?
I say I'm Black, with more Black. And it's crazy because they see my kids and their hair, and they're like, well, what are they mixed with? And I'm I'm like, why do they have to be mixed with something? You know, why can't you just accept them for what they look like and who they are? They are not mixed with nothing but more black. You know?
Shea, how do you identify?
I'm black too. I'm black. I'm Bayesian, Guyanese.
So, so you carry all those parts
Yeah.
of yourself.
Yeah, me too, actually. I same Scotian and Guyanese.
But it crosses lines, right? So it's not just about being Scotian, it's about, again, being black.
Yeah.
You know? As much as I say I'm a proud Scotian, but I am black, and there's no getting away from it. But I could be black and Scotian, I could be a very proud Scotian, but I'm black. You know, so society will make sure that I know I'm black.
And what about belongingness? So how do you feel like you belong here in Quebec? Where do you feel like your place is? Do you feel like you have a place?
I believe that makes, for me personally, I believe my place is what I make it, right? So no one's going to put me in a place.
Say it again, babe.
I place myself, right? So I can't speak to anything else except saying that, no one's going to put me in a place. I place myself.
Shea, has it been different for you, or because you looked at your ground, so I want to know.
I feel like what Nanny said, I agree with that, you know. And I also feel like I didn't feel the need to want to fit into another community when I had so much around me already, you know. I didn't need, like, I already had everything that I needed. So it wasn't like,
I'm so proud of my daughter.
Aww. How would you, if you could try to think of a way that the community could become stronger, since you guys have first-hand experience with the community, right? Whether it's the Burgundy community or your family community, if you could think of a way that we can increase strength in the Black community, what do you think that would look like?
I think sticking together. I mean, I find our society, there's such a division at times between different cultural backgrounds. I mean, imagine if we all stood on one platform, like, you know, as a whole, not as separate. You know, you got your West Indian countries that are separated in countries. So you got, you know, and then you got your Canadian Black separated from the West Indian Black. Like, if we all stuck together, what amazing things we could do as a people. But there's such a division, I find, within the Black community where, you know, it makes it hard for anyone to stand up when you could collectively stand up. So I think that's something that as a Black community that we need to work on, is to be collectively strong, not just if it's Jamaican Association or the Vincentian Association or the Barbadians Association. It has to be collective. It shouldn't be one association, you know. So, and I think that's what would make the biggest difference. That's that's what I think. Yeah.
If you could give advice to somebody who doesn't, a Black person who doesn't have the community that you have, like the close-knit family, on how to stand in their identity strongly, what advice would you give them?
That's a good question. I think love yourself. Honestly, you need to love yourself and accept yourself for who you are, and don't let others take up your brain space and tell you who you are. Know who you are. That would be my advice. Just accept and love yourself.
And I think that comes with age.
Well, probably.
The self-love and acceptance, not caring what other people really think and their opinions.
It comes with age, as well as it comes with knowing who you are and where you come from. I mean, honestly, like as a teenager and as to the time I had my first child, I was two different people. My first child made me like, no, this is who you are and no one's going to tell you differently type thing. Whereas before my first child, I would cry at a dime, you know? Seriously. And it was like, no, now I have all this to live for and be me. Like, you know, so it made a difference of loving myself and accepting me for who I was versus not letting others take up my brain space and telling me who I was.
If you could give advice, Maria, to other Black girls who might be struggling with their identity as Black girls, what advice do you think you'd give them?
Say it's me. I don't like my skin. What are you gonna tell me? So for me to like my own skin.
I could say your skin's beautiful.
It's a start.
So what would you tell her so she could love herself?
Your skin's beautiful.
Oh, Maria, so cute.